Okay, good evening, everyone. As we are entering the lofty day of Erev Yom Kippur, it's interesting that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says that there is a very special mitzvah to do tshuva and do vidui on Erev Yom Kippur. Because Lefnei Hashem titaru, before you come to Hashem to purify ourselves. And one of the ways to purify ourselves is through Torah. Torah is a mikvah of Eish. It's a mikvah of fire. Haloi koi devarai ke'eish ne'um Hashem. And, they used to say that a daf Gemara before davening is like going to the mikveh. And so we learn to be mekayim the mitzvah v'dibar tabam v'asas nachas ruach liyotzreinu. We are dedicated by Shalom Fogel, Lilu Nishmas Yaakov Zeb ben Yuda Aryeh, Rivka bas Yaakov Yosef, Tzivya Miriam bas God, Yosef ben Zion ben Yaakov Zev, and for a great shidduch for Chayat Tzivya bas Shoshana Gittel, by Baruch Ian, Lilu Nishmas Yaakov Chaim ben Abba, Esther bas Yona, Avram ben Shmuel HaKohen, and L'Refu Shalema for Liba bas Anya, by A.B. Spry. We're sponsored for the spiritual, emotional, and physical protection of Yeshua Menachem Mendel ben Vela Shendel Rivka, and we're sponsored by Berish Kesseman, L'Refu Shalema for Shoshana Basadina, and by Mark Frankel, his father Yisrael Tzvi ben Chaim Yeshua Falak.
L'Refu Shalema for Leah Bas
Edelminka should have a refuah shalema b'sech shecha Yisrael. We're holding 3 lines from the bottom of Tesvavam and Beis, where we are going to address another source for how we know that if a zar, a non-kohen, is mekabel the blood, that the avodah is desecrated. It's puzzle. So, Debei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, in the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel, it was taught, Asya kal v'chaymer b'balmum. We learn out a kal v'chaymer from a kohen who is blemished. Ma balmum she'oichel. Madach, a balmum is allowed to eat karbonas. Just because he's blemished, he's allowed to eat karbonas. But in Avad Chilel, if he does the avodah, he desecrates. So then, a zar, she'ein oichel, he's not allowed to have kachi kachin. Kachi kachin could only be eaten by zichrei kahuna. So a zar, she'ein oichel, that he can't eat, didn't shema Avad Chilel. Surely, if he does the avodah, he desecrates it. Says the Gemara, well, Ma'ala Balmum, that's different. Shekain also by Korav Kemakriv. There, a Balmum is more disqualified, because not only is the one that's offering the carbon, not only is the one that's offering the carbon disqualified, but the carbon is also disqualified if it's blemished. So the Gemara says, well, Tamei Yochiach. The Tamei will disprove you, because the Tamei disqualifies the Avodah, even though it only affects the Kayin. It doesn't affect the carbon, because a live animal can become Tamei. So the Gemara says, well, Ma'ala Tamei, there, you know why a Tamei disqualifies? Shekei Mitame, it's Mitame others. While a Zar doesn't make other people disqualified. Says Gemara, well, the blemished Kayin doesn't make other people disqualified, and yet he disqualifies. V'chazar adin, and therefore we'll go in a circle. Each one doesn't have the deficiency. Each one doesn't have the advantage of the other, right? A balmum who affects the one who offers it and the carbon. A tummy doesn't do that. Tummy is metame. Well, the balmum doesn't do that to someone else, right? The common denominator is shemuz horin. That the common denominator between the two of them is that they're not supposed to do the avodah. V'im avdu chilul, and if they do it, they desecrate the avodah. Afani avizar, so I'll include also a non-kain shemuzar that he's not supposed to do the avodah. V'im avad chilul, and if he does it, he desecrates the avodah. So first thing where it says, okay, minolon the muzar. How do we know? There's two things. The Zar is not supposed to do the avodah, and the Zar desecrates the avodah. So how do you know that the Zar is not supposed to do the avodah? If it's from the pasuk of V'yinazu Mikachei B'nei Yisrael, that you separate from the Kachei B'nei Yisrael, so then that pasuk also says V'lo Yechalel. It also says Chilul, so then we wouldn't need all Kal V'chaimer. Chilul begufek sibek. That pasuk says that they desecrate. So if they have that pasuk, we wouldn't need to be looking for a kal v'chaimer. Ella we know because it says zar lo yikrav aleichem. A zar should not come to join the kehanim. So we know that they're not allowed to do the avodah, and then from the kal v'chaimer we learn out that they desecrate the avodah. So the Gemara says, yeah. But you wanted to learn it out from the joint lesson and of a tummy and a balmum. But we could have a pircha. Ikal mifrach malat tzad shava shemen. The common denominator shekein lo ychutru b'bama. They're both not permitted on a private altar. A tummy is not allowed to do the avodah on a private altar, and a blemished kohen is not allowed to do the avodah on a private altar. But a zar, a non-kohen, can do on a private altar. So you can't learn it from the two of them. So it says, Gemara, you're right. We're going to have to add a new item to the list. Lo yitema tomei yochiach, ela ema onein yochiach. Now we know that an onein, somebody that lost a close relative that day, is not supposed to do the avodah, and if he does it, he disqualifies. And the oinen doesn't make other people an oinen, so it's not like it's not like a balmum that it is disqualified and the offering is disqualified. That doesn't apply to an oinen. Mala oinen shekain asa b'maiser. Einen has a chumrah that is not allowed to eat maiser. Not allowed to eat maiser sheni. Well, balmum yochiach. Balmum is allowed to eat maiser sheni and still disqualifies. What about balmum that they make the carbon like the kayin? They're both disqualified. Einen yochiach. The chazar adin. Each one has a different quality that the other one has. The common denominator is shemuz harin, that they're warned not to do the avodah, and if they do the avodah, they disqualify it. So also a zar, if he does the avodah, he disqualifies it. Says Gemara about hakinami lifrak, we still have a pircha. Malat tzad shavish bem shekein lo ychutru b'bama. Both an oinen and a balmum are not permitted on a bama. Ma'ashe enkein azar can do an abama. Says the Gemara, Maskula of Sama Breid Rava, Uman Lema Landa Einen Asabaman. Who says that one who is an Einen is not allowed to do the avodah on bama? Dil Mashari Bama. He's permitted to do it in the bama. So therefore, it's not a pircha that both balmum and a einin are not allowed to do the avodah on a bama, just like a zar and einin could do the avodah. So therefore, that's one source that we learned it out of Kal V'Chaimer from a Matzad, from einin and a balmum. Now the Gemara says another source. Excuse me. Rav Misharshia Amar, Asya Kal V'Chaimer Miyoshev. We learned it out of Kal V'Chaimer from somebody who was doing the avodah sitting. Ma Yoshev She'oichel. Now, a kohen who's sitting is allowed to eat im avad chilul, but if he does it while the avodah while he's sitting, he desecrates. Zor she'ein oichel, a zor who's not allowed to eat kachim, eino din she'im avad chilul. Surely, if he does the avodah, he desecrates it. So the Gemara says, well, Yoshev has a different reason why it might be more stringent, and that is Mali Yoshev shekaim pasal edus. Somebody sitting can't give testimony. Could only give testimony standing. Says the Gemara, no, we learn it out mi Yoshev Talmud Chacham. The din is, if a person is a Talmud Chacham, we waive, and he could give testimony even while sitting. And yet, although he could give testimony while sitting, the din is, and although he could eat kachim, he cannot do the avodah, and if he does it, he desecrates it. So also, a zar who cannot eat kachim, surely if he does the avodah, he desecrates it. Says the Gemara, Ma'al Shem Yoshev Shekaim Pashal Eidus. There is, at least by sitting, even though by sitting Talmud Chacham, it doesn't pass Eidus, but there is by sitting a psul Eidus. So says the Gemara, Shem Yoshev Loi Parach. We don't ask because there is a type of sitting. Since there is a type of sitting that's kosher Eidus, that's not considered a percha. And if you say we could ask such a percha, and that is that since there is a type of sitting that's pasal eidus, maybe that's why if he sits he disqualifies. Asya mi Yoshev u'mechad ma'anach. We learn how to Kal V'Chaimer, let's say from Yoshev and Einain, or from Yoshev and Balmum, or from Yoshev and Tomei. Says the Gemara, why don't we say that the common denominator of the two of them are why don't we say that the common denominator between Yoshev and, let's say, a Balmum is that they're possible Bama? So obviously, since we don't ask that pircha, it must be that he holds that Yoshev is allowed to be done on the Bama. The Yoshev, the kosher b'Bama minala. How do we know that if he's sitting, it could be done on a private altar? Oh, that's simple. Because Amakra, Lamod Lifnei Hashem L'Shosai. Where do you have to stand? Only if it's Lifnei Hashem, only if it's in the base of Mikdash. Lifnei Hashem, but below Lifnei Bama. If you do it on a Bama, you don't have to stand. You can do the Avodah sitting. Okay, so now we move on to the next psul in the Mishnah. The next psul in the Mishnah is an onain, one who is lost a close relative that day. The one who lost the close relative that day is, if he does the avodah, he disqualifies the avodah. How do we know that? Now I want to give you a hakdama over here that a kohen gadol is allowed to do the avodah as an oinen. As a matter of fact, there's a famous Ragat Shavar. The Ragat Shavar says that if the Ragat Shavar says that if Avram Avinu had to be a Kohen Gadol. Why? Because he was told to do the Akedah. Now, if he slaughtered Yitzchak, he would become an Einan. So how would he be able to finish the Akedas Yitzchak? How would he be able to offer him up on the Mizbeach? He would be an Einan, he would be grieving for his son. So it must be that Avraham Avinu was the Kohen Gadol, and therefore he would be able to finish the Akedah. So, Einan Minalan, how do we know that an Einan is disqualified? The Chsiv, it says, Umen HaMikdash lo yetzei, v'lo yechala. The Kohen Gadol, when he loses a close relative, he should not leave the Mikdash. That means he could continue his Avodah, and he won't desecrate the Avodah. That's only the Kohen Gadol. Ha'acher, but a regular Kohen, Shelo Yatsa, that doesn't leave and does the Avodah, Chilel. So that's how we know that a regular Kohen will disqualify the Avodah if he's an Einan. Rebbe Lazar Amar Mehacha. Now here we enter a very cryptic issue in a very, very horrible time. This was a very, very horrible time in for Klal Yisrael. I shouldn't say horrible. It was very traumatic, very tragic. When they inaugurated the Mishkan, so we know that Nadav and Avihu did something extracurricular, and the Rebbeinu Shalom executed them. At that time, one of the korbanos that were brought was a goat for a chattas. And instead of eating it, Aaron had it burnt. And Moshe Rabbeinu was surprised that Aaron burnt it instead of eating it. So Aaron said, Moshe Rabbeinu figured, maybe it's because Elazar and Isamar, Aaron's other two sons, offered the carbon. And since they are Einanin, and they weren't the Kohen Gadol, so Moshe said, maybe that's why you burnt it. Heine krivu. So Aaron said, why? Did they offer it? Ani crafty. I offered it. And I'm a Kohen Gadol, I could do it. That's not the reason why I burnt it. So from there we see that if Elazar and Isamar offered it, since they were regular Kahanim, that would disqualify it and be the rationale to burn it. Machlal the inu ekriv, if Elazar and Isamar would have offered it, shaper is tereif. It would have been proper for it to be burnt. So that's a raya, that if a regular Kohen does it when they were Einim, because they just lost their brothers, Nadav and Avihu, then it would be proper for it to burn. So the Gemara says, Rebbe Lazar, my time Eloi Amar, Umin HaMikdash lo yetzei. Why doesn't Rebbe Lazar learn from Min HaMikdash lo yetzei? Why doesn't he learn from that passage that just the Kohen Gadol shouldn't leave, implying that other Kahanim, they should leave and they shouldn't do the Avodah? Amalach, so he says, Miksiv ha'acher shelo yatsa chila. Does it say that if other Kahanim did not leave, they desecrated? It doesn't say that. It may be a regular Kohen who does it would also not invalidate it, right? We might think that it means the other way around. We might think that the Kohen Gadol, who has such an elevated status, if he does it, he disqualifies. But a regular Kohen, maybe who's on a lesser level, doesn't disqualify, so we can't learn it out from there. Now, mi'idach, The other one, my time Eloi Amar Mehene Krivu. That seems to be a very good source. That Moshe Rabbeinu said maybe you burnt it because Elazar in the summer offered it up. So Aaron said, "Do you think they offered it up? I offered it up. I'm the Kohen Gadol." So why isn't that a source that if Elazar in the summer indeed offered it up, that it would be a reason for it to be burnt? So that would be a proof that which is offered by an oinen is burnt. He holds that there's a whole different shot in the pasuk. This is a whole different way of learning. He holds that what happened is what happened is that Moshe Rabbeinu thought that they burnt it because there was nobody that was available to eat the carbon. Because remember, the only Kohanim then were Aaron and Elazar and Isamar. And all three of them were Oinanim. And he held that the Isra of Aninis extended to the night. And therefore, he thought maybe they burnt it because there was nobody to eat it. Even if a Kohen Gadol could do the Avodah, but he can't eat it when he's an Oinen. And he thought that the Aninis extended even into the night. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu thought maybe you burnt it because there was nobody to eat it. So Aaron says, no. Hein hayoim hikrivu. It was offered today. And since a chatas could be eaten in the night, we would have been able to eat it that night. Because the Aninis doesn't extend into the night. Rather, the reason why we burnt it is because the incidental factor. The carbon got tameh, and you can't eat it when it's tameh, because savar mipnei tuma nisrafa. Now, we don't know. It just tells us it got tameh. Now,
is it considered dichri? I mean, if they weren't able to eat it by day, and they had to wait till the night.
No, it's not. It's not absolute the carbon. I want to welcome in Shimon Klein, and Mel Zachter, and Baruch Ian, Irving Fishbaum, Shalom Fogel, Yaakov Warman, Dr. Guy, Cyril Fisher, Menachem Yemansky, Ruvain Pollack, Shelley Zeitlin, Saba, Barry Cement, Shalom Schmidt, Shlomi Schmidt, Rabbi Kranz, Nachman Chapler, Elia Yaffe, Itchy, nice to see you, Itchy. Dr. Yudel, Stephen Holtzman, Avram Rezepkovitz, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Ilya Shutman, Yitzi Muller, Daniel Rosenberg, Danny Vogel. Here in Shul, we have Berish Gesseman and Chaim Kramer, Michal Avram, who we missed last night, Reuven Shannet, and the Gemara now tells us the Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, another source for an Oinen disqualifying the Avodah, Asi b'Kal v'Chaimer b'Balmum. We didn't out from a Kal v'Chaimer from a blemished Kohen. Oma Balmum. She'oichel, he's allowed to eat. Kachim, im avad chilel, Oinen she'ein oichel, an Oinen that's not allowed to eat, ain't a din shem avad chilel. So now the Gemara again asks the Percha Mal Balmum, she'kein also by craven k'makriven. We make the din of a Balmum applicable both to the Kohen and also to the carbon that's offered. It can't be blemished. Well, Zoryachich, a non-Kohen will disprove you. A non-Kohen disqualifies, even though it doesn't it doesn't apply to the animal. I malazar shekain ein loy takana. A zar can never become good. And a zar can never become fixed, says the Gemara. So maybe that's why a zar disqualifies. But on the other hand, an Oinen does get fixed after the day. He's not an Oinen anymore. Well, the Gemara says Baal Mum Yochiach. Baal Mum would disprove you that it disqualifies, even though a Baal Mum could get better, certain blemishes could be healed. V'chazar adin lo'iroi zeh k'roi zeh v'lo'iroi zeh k'roi zeh. Each one has a feature that the other one doesn't have. The Baal Mum, it's applicable both to the kayin and to the carbon. Well, that feature is not by a zar. A zar, on the other hand, could never be fixed, but a Baal Mum, toichiach, that it could be fixed. Each one has a different feature. That they're not supposed to do the avodah. If they do it, they desecrate the avodah. He's not supposed to do the avodah. So here again, the Gemara says, how do you know that the onain is not supposed to do the avodah? Heichon muzer. Ilema b'min hamikdash lo yetze. If it's from the pasuk that the kohen gadol should not leave the mikdash, but the other kohanim should leave the mikdash, then we would already know from that pasuk v'lo yechalu, and it won't desecrate. So then we wouldn't need to come on to a kal v'chomer. So that can't be the source for where we know that it's the Einan is not allowed to do the Avodah. The Chilul B'Guf Exhibit, because that also says desecration, and then we wouldn't need to be looking for a Kal V'Chaimer. Ella, the source is Mehein Hikrivu, where Aaron said, did they offer it up? That you should say that that's why it was burnt. And we hold that the reason why it was burned, it was because of aninas, and therefore that's where we know that Elazar and Isamar would not have been able to do the avodah if they were the ones that offered it up. So the Gemara says, but even if you want to use the source of a learning an einan out from Balmum and Zar, the common denominator between them, there's no exception. A Balmum, there's no exception, and a Zar, there's no exception. Now that doesn't apply to an Einan, because that is Hoter Michlali. Because an Einan, who's a Kain Gadol, is allowed to do it. So there is an exception. So the Gemara says, well, okay, we're going to add a third thing to the mix. Tamei Yechiach. Tamei, who is not allowed to do the Avodah, and if he does the Avodah, he disqualifies. And at Tamei, there is an exception, because Tumah Hutra B'tzibur, if the community is B'tzibur, is Tamei, you bring the carbon B'tumah. Ma'al Tamei, she came with Tamei. But Tamei has the feature that it's Metamei, which is not true by Einan. The Einan can't make other people an Einan. So the Gemara says, Hanach Yechichu. Well, a Balmum doesn't make another person a Balmum. V'chazar adin. And then we go back and forth. Hatzad HaShavah Shebehen of Tamei and Zar and Balmum is that Shemus Harin, and if they do the Avodah, they disqualify. Says the Gemara, we still have a Pircha. What's the Pircha? The Lifreich. See how this Gemara, Rabbi Yisai, is stretching us? What could be better to do before Yom HaKadosh? Says the Gemara, the Lifreich, Ma'ala Tzad HaShavah Shebehen, the common denominator, Shekein Lo Ychutru Mechlolon Eitzel Kohen Gadol. There's no exception by there's no exception by a Kohen Gadol b'Karban Yachid. The even though a Kohen Gadol can do the avodah as an einin, but the Kohen Gadol cannot do the avodah b'tumah by a private offering. So there is by tumah also lo yhutru b'chlala by a Kohen Gadol, by a Karban Yachid. So the Gemara says, okay, but there is a tumah that is hutru b'chlala, and that is by a Karban Sibur. Shem tumah mia ishtarai. There is a case of hutru b'chlala. You had a question that that by oinen it's hutru b'chlala, and there's an exception by a Kohen Gadol, while by Tameh there's no exception by a Kohen Gadol by a private offering, because even a Kohen Gadol can't do it b'tumah by a private offering. But by the Shem Tumah, there is hutru b'chlala by a communal offering. Shem Tumah mi ishtarai. Rav Misharshia Amar, Misharshia says another source that an einin does the avodah when he's if an einin does the avodah, he disqualifies the avodah. What's Rav Misharshia's source? It's amazing how the Gemara is utilizing all kinds of kal v'chomers over here. Rav Misharsha Amar, Asya b'kal v'chomer miyoshev. He learns it out from a kal v'chomer, from a kohen who is sitting. A kohen gadol that sits is allowed to eat. Im avad chilul, but if he does the avodah while sitting, he desecrates it. Einen she'eina eichel, an einen who is not allowed to eat when he's in aninas, eina din shim avad chilul, that if he does the avodah, he desecrates it. So the Gemara says, Ma'al Yoshev shekain pasal le'edus. One is sitting, maybe is more chamer, and he disqualifies because he's pasal le'edus. He can't give testimony while sitting. Says the Gemara, Yoshev Talmud Chacham. We learn it out from Talmud Chacham who sits, because as we said, a Talmud Chacham could give testimony while sitting. I Ma'al Shem Yoshev shekain pasal le'edus. But we said that there is by sitting in general a psul le'edus, and that should be maybe the reason why he disqualifies. Shem Yoshev loy parach. We don't say such a percha. Since there is a person who's sitting that could give edus, that's not considered a feature to refute the kal v'chomer. The imtim tzalay parach. You could ask that. We'll learn it out from Yoshev and one of the others. We'll learn it out from Yoshev and a Zar, or we'll learn it out from Yoshev and a Tomei, or we'll learn it out from Yoshev and a Balmum. Now, the Mishnah says, an Einen that does the Avodah, Apostle. He disqualifies the Avodah. So here, this is very interesting. Amar Rava, lo yishanu ela b'karban yachid. That's only by a private offering. Aval b'karban sibur meratza. But if the kohen, who is an einin, does a communal carbon, let's say the kohen does the carbon tamid when he's an einin, so there it appeases. Kal v'chomer mituma. A kal v'chomer from a kohen that's tamid. Ma tuma shaloi hutra mechlol eitzel kohen gadol b'karban yachid. Tuma, there is no allowance for a kohen gadol to do a private offering b'tuma. So that's a feature that by tuma there is no exception. It brooks no exception. Even a kohen gadol cannot do the avodah, a private avodah, when he's tamei. Hutra etzel hedyet b'karban sibur. Yet, although Tumah has this chumrah, that it doesn't brook any exception by a kohen gadol, by a private offering, yet the Tumah is waived if it's done for a communal offering, aninas, that's lesser. A kohen gadol could even do a private offering when he's an einan. Surely, if a kohen hedyot does the avodah while he's a einan by a communal offering, it should be good. Very interesting. This is a really interesting proof. The Gemara now is going to spin this three other ways. So let's get clear the basic argument over here. The Gemara makes a big chiddush that if a kohen who is an einan, a regular kohen hedyot, who is an einan, who would disqualify the carbon if it's a private offering, but if it's a public offering, like the Talmud, and he does it ba'aninas, there it's kosher. Now what's the Gemara's argument? The Gemara says, well, Tumah, that has a very big stringency, that even by a kohen gadol, there's no allowance for a private carbon. Kohen gadol can't do the avodah b'tumah if it's a private offering. Yet, Tumah is hutra b'tzibur. A kohen hedyot that's tumah is allowed to do a communal offering. Then aninas, which is lighter, because a kohen gadol could do a private offering when he's an einan. A kohen gadol could do a private offering when he's an einan. Surely, a regular kohen, if he does a communal carbon ba'aninas, it should be kosher. Okay? So now the Gemara says, you good? Now the Gemara says, there's three other ways to look at this. We could argue very differently. Maskefel Rabba Bar Ahilai, Lo Tusar Aninas Eitzel Kohen Gadol B'Karben Yachid B'Kal V'Chaymer. We should argue that maybe a kohen gadol should not be able to do a private offering by when he's an einan. Which is mutter for a regular kohen communally. A kohen gadol can't do a private offering when he's tamei. Aninas Aninas, where, as far as we know, a kohen hedyot is not allowed to do a communal offering when he's an einan. There's no source for that. Einoi din that if a kohen gadol can't do a private offering by tumah, even though a regular kohen could do tumah b'tzibur, then by aninas, where a regular kohen can't do a communal offering as an einan, so surely we should say that the kohen gadol shouldn't be able to do a private offering when he's an einan. Aninas shelo yoter eitzel kohen hedyot b'karben tzibur, eino din shelo yoter eitzel kohen gadol b'karben yachid. We could argue that way, or we could argue differently, and that is, maybe a kohen gadol should be able to do a private offering by tumah. The tutar tumah eitzel kohen gadol b'karben yachid b'kal v'chaymer. Uma aninas madach by grief. Shaloi huter eitzel kohen hedyot b'karben tzibur. By grief, there's no allowance for a regular kohen to do a communal carbon because there's no sort for that. Huter eitzel kohen gadol b'karben yachid. A kohen gadol could do a private offering when he's an einan. Toma, where it's allowed for a regular kohen to do it, a public offering. Toma shehotra eitzel kohen hedyot b'karben tzibur, eino din shehotra eitzel kohen gadol b'karben yachid. Surely a kohen gadol should be able to do a private offering when he's tamei. So maybe argue that way, or we should argue that maybe a Kohen Hedyot should not be able to do a carbon sibur when he's tamei. Maybe we shouldn't permit a regular Kohen to do betuma, the carbon tamid. Uma aninas, shehotre eitzel Kohen gadol, the carbon yachid. Malach aninas, which is permitted by a Kohen gadol, by a private offering. We don't allow a regular Kohen to do it b'tzibur. Lahutra eitzel Kohen hedyot b'carbon tzibur. Tuma, shelahutra eitzel Kohen gadol b'carbon yachid. Tuma, where we didn't give a allowance, an exception that a Kohen gadol could do a private offering b'tuma. Einay din sheloi tuta b'Kohen hedyot b'carbon tzibur. Surely the Kohen hedyot shouldn't be able to do tuma if it's a communal carbon. In other words, maybe argue like this, and let's go this over again. Maybe argue that a regular Kohen should not be able to do tuma b'tzibur. Why? The din is that aninas is lesser, because a Kohen gadol is allowed to do a private offering b'aninas, and even so, a regular Kohen can't do a communal offering with aninas. So tumah, which is more severe, that a Kohen gadol is not allowed to do a private altar, a private offering when he's tamei. Surely a regular Kohen shouldn't be able to do betuma communal carbon when he's tamei. So the Gemara shows that you could spin this argument in three different ways. How this is going to be resolved, we'll discuss Mirz Hashem Motzi Yom Kippur. What time is Motzi Yom Kippur? 9:15? Yaakov.
I think it's 9:30, I think.
9:30? 9:30 Motzi Yom Kippur. 9:30 Motzi Yom Kippur. Okay, now let me tell you what the schedule is now. Now we're going to do for the Shabbos Shabbosim table. Anybody that's going to be here tomorrow night in Shul doesn't have to stay, because I'm going to be teaching this Kol Nidre night. So, but if you're not going to be joining me for Kol Nidre night, then you might want to stay. It's an important share.